there, partners, and welcome to Rising. We've got another edition of our show for you today. Happy to be here. How about you, Briahna?
Robby, what are you up to? Have you been listening to the Beyonce album? What's going on here?
No, it just is what came to mind. I don't know.
All right, well, let me giddy up to the news now. The Supreme Court has decided it will take up the issue of whether former President Donald Trump can claim presidential immunity in Jack Smith's prosecution of Trump's alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election. The justice's order puts proceedings in that trial on hold, further throwing into doubt whether the case will go to jury before election night in November. MSNBC host Chris Hayes said the court's decision was part of a conspiracy to keep Trump on the ballot and out of the courtroom in 2024. Let's watch.
It is an unmistakable sign from the MAGA majority of the Trump-created court that they are with him, that they are going to use their power to make sure he does not face trial in an election year for attempting to end American democracy.
Also of note, just yesterday, a judge in Illinois removed the former president from its state's ballot under the 14th Amendment's insurrection clause, making it the third state to do so after the Colorado Supreme Court's precedent-setting ruling last year. Okay, so we talked about this earlier when the lower court hearing came out, talking about the fact that if the Supreme Court did take it up, it could have a variety of effects on the timing of the trial. There was a sort of best case scenario for the Democrats' version of events where it could still proceed relatively quickly and have a chance of coming to some conclusion before Election Day, or a worst case scenario where there was no possibility, given the scheduling, that could possibly be before the court. And it does seem like there's still an opportunity here from the Democrats' perspective to have this trial happen before Election Day. But the problem is it going to end up being an October surprise? Is it going to end up being too late in the game to really affect voters' decisions?
Right. I mean, look, the process from a legal standpoint just has to play out along its own timeline. The Supreme Court has scheduled this basically as quickly as they possibly can, given that they are going to take it up. What Chris Hayes and other liberals I was seeing on social media are really mad about is that they decided to weigh in on this at all, and rather than just letting the lower court ruling stand, and suggesting that this is an effort to delay the trial so that it takes place after the election. Okay, look, Supreme Court justices are political actors, so I can't rule out that that's part of their calculation. But on some level, I mean, this is a pretty fundamental question, whether the person who occupies the office of the executive branch enjoys this kind of a vast immunity. I don't think anyone should hold that kind of, anyone in elected office should have that immunity from prosecution. We want our, not just Trump, but all political figures to be held to account, to be, when they misuse the powers of their office. So I don't think it's not on its face ridiculous that the Supreme Court is going to consider this question, even though it does have the effect of potentially delaying the trial beyond the election day.
Well, sure, but remember, the Supreme Court takes up a very small number of cases every year. It certainly is not the case that every broadly relevant issue is taken up by the Supreme Court. And remember, this was decided by the D.C. Circuit Court in a unanimous decision that legal experts across the political spectrum evaluated as very conclusive. I don't think even Republicans at this point, or any point really, were arguing that there's any merit to Donald Trump's claims here. Remember, what he's claiming is that basically he is broadly immune from anything because he's the president of the United States of America. It goes fundamentally to the core of what it means for us to be a country and a constitutional republic, a democratic republic. So this isn't really about the merits needing to be decided by the upper court. And I do think there's a very strong case that this is a political decision. But framing it as a conspiracy in the way Democrats have done, it's a little bit of a mixed bag, because here's the problem. It is fine to believe that the Supreme Court is a political institution. Very few people at this point, I think, would argue that it's not. Republicans have been arguing for years against activist judges in the other direction. And now we have activist judges who are conservative in nature that are overwhelmingly influencing the Supreme Court decisions right now. That being said, the Biden administration in particular, and establishment Democrats more generally, have been very skeptical, very hesitant to do anything serious about Supreme Court reform. So it kind of feels like, what are you really complaining about? You understand this is a political institution, and what you're really complaining about right now is that you lost the grips on this particular ability to advance your political efforts through the courts. And Republicans are just in the advantage seat right now.
And it's political both ways. Another state, Illinois, has decided to take Trump's name off the ballot. That's legal decision. Is that not political? Is that not some effort to make it less likely Trump can win the election? And that's not up to. And also, I think the thrust of like the Chris Hayes criticism, some others, obviously they're concerned that if the election takes place, or the prosecution of Trump the trial takes place after Election Day, it's just not going to happen because he'll be able to use, if he wins the election, he could use the powers that he assumes as president to make some of these things go away. Not the Georgia case, but perhaps the federal case, the Jack Smith case. But they're also mad because they think if it happens before Election Day, that could change the results of the election if he's convicted. And a lot of people are making that assertion that resolving Trump's legal issues before the election will be bad for him if he's convicted, and thus it's important to do that, which is an explicitly political rationale.
Yeah.
Also a deeply unproven one, frankly. Look, this guy has faced a lot of criminal, like he's been found liable for defamation against E. Jean Carroll. He just had a ruling against him in New York with respect to his businesses.
Yeah.
This is a controversial man whose controversies are known, and it has not greatly impacted him. So it's certainly not impacted his support among Republicans. It doesn't, frankly, seem to be the kind of issues that keep independents even at bay. Now, could it damage him? Sure. Polls suggest that people have said that if he were convicted, that would maybe change their mind about whether they're going to vote for him.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. It's a kind of untested theory.
I think that's a good point. And if I were doing columns for Democrats, which I blessedly am not, I would be focused not so much on the outcome of the trial as having an effect. Because remember, the reason why, and this makes Democrats crazy, the reason why nothing seems to stick to Trump largely is because there's very different media environments. And Democrats have contributed to this, by the way, around the 1-6 messaging. People look at what happened on 1-6. They say Donald Trump was not responsible. This is a witch hunt. They're coming after him from freedom of speech, et cetera, et cetera. Where the trial, I think, might start to peel some voters away from Trump is that it might excavate the nature of the fraud scheme in the weeks preceding January 6th. If that is true, and if that is which is my instinct, and if that is what actually will motivate some Trump voters, could motivate some Trump voters away from Trump, then that is something that could be excavated with or without the trial taking place. Democrats have had all of this time to focus their media and focus their messaging on the actual scheme as opposed to the fact of people rushing the Capitol building on the date of January 6th. And that might be a place they should pivot to now that we have substantial delays now in not only the Jack Smith case, but also the Georgia case because of the Fani Willis debacle.
Yeah, I think it speaks to a liberal fear that Biden just can't beat Trump in a head-to-head match unless there's some extraordinary spectacle of a trial right before it. They feel like they need a Hail Mary because they're looking at the same polls we're looking at that show Joe Biden very capable of losing this election to Donald Trump, perhaps more likely to do so.
Yeah. All right. Hoping for an October surprise. Will they get it? Keep with us. We'll let you know more about what's going on in the news right after this.